His first words to our 14-year-old twins were, "I'm your father." Mine were, "Get out." But when Joseph asked him the question I'd dreaded for 14 years, "Why didn't you want us?" and this billionaire CEO dropped to his knees and sobbed, I realized the man I'd spent a decade and a half hating had been lied to, just like me. And the person who'd kept us apart had a name I'd almost forgotten. I woke at 5:32 a.m. to the sound of frost crackling against the kitchen window. It's a specific sound, brittle, persistent, like nature reminding you that winter doesn't negotiate. My body had learned to rise before the world asked anything of me, back when the twins were newborns and I was terrified I'd sleep through their cries. They were 14 now, Joseph and Beryl, my reasons for everything. And they didn't cry anymore. They'd learned early that crying didn't summon help in a house where only one adult existed. But what neither of us knew that December morning was that silence was about to shatter. I slid out of bed, my feet meeting the cold floor, and wrapped my worn robe tighter. The house was small. 3 bedrooms, if you counted the one that doubled as storage and laundry. The walls were thin enough that I could hear Joseph's steady breathing from across the hall, and Beryl's softer sighs from the room beside his. They sounded peaceful. I wanted them to stay that way. But peace, I'd learned, was something you borrowed, never something you kept. And in 48 hours, the man who'd destroyed my life would be standing on my doorstep with 2 wrapped boxes and a truth that would unravel 14 years of carefully constructed lies. By 6 a.m., I had coffee brewing in the decade-old pot that sputtered like it might give up any day. The kitchen counter was crowded. Bills stacked under a ceramic bowl Christine gave me last Christmas, a half-written grocery list on the back of an envelope, 2 lunchboxes waiting to be filled with whatever I could stretch from the fridge. I didn't mind the cramped space. What I minded was the weight of making every dollar scream. Beryl's winter coat had a rip along the pocket seam. Joseph's sneakers were holding on by sheer willpower and duct tape. And Christmas was 9 days away. 9 days until my children would wake up hoping this year might feel different. I pressed my palms against the counter and exhaled slowly. They never asked for much. That was the problem. They'd learned not to want, and it gutted me every single time I caught Joseph staring too long at other kids' new phones, or Beryl pretending she didn't notice when classmates talked about family vacations. Here's what you need to understand about raising children alone. You don't just provide food and shelter. You become their entire emotional infrastructure. And sometimes that infrastructure cracks under the pressure. I heard movement upstairs, the creak of Beryl's bedroom door, then the shuffle of Joseph's feet hitting the hallway. They were awake. I straightened my shoulders, wiped whatever heaviness had settled on my face, and turned toward the stove. Pancakes. I'd make pancakes. We had just enough mix left, and if I added extra water and a little vanilla extract, I could stretch it. That's what you do when you're the only one standing between your children and hunger. You stretch everything. But what was coming couldn't be stretched or managed or controlled. Joseph came down first, his dark hair sticking up in every direction, his eyes still half closed. He looked so much like his father it hurt sometimes, the same sharp jawline starting to emerge, the same steel blue eyes that could pin you in place. But where Willis had been restless, hungry for more, Joseph was steady, protective. He'd become the man of the house without anyone asking him to be. "Morning, Mom," he mumbled, sliding into the chair at our tiny kitchen table. "Morning, baby." "I'm not a baby," I smiled. "You'll always be my baby, even when you're 40. He didn't argue, just reached for the orange juice I'd already poured and drank it slowly, his gaze drifting toward the window where frost still clung stubbornly to the glass. Beryl appeared a moment later, quieter than her brother, her movements careful and deliberate. She had my face, the soft curve of my cheeks, my dark curls, but her eyes were all Willis, observant, analytical, missing nothing. She saw the bills under the bowl. She always saw. "Mom," she said gently, sitting across from Joseph, "do we need to skip the holiday concert trip? I know the ticket's $15. My chest tightened. "You're going to that concert, Beryl. But you're going." She didn't push. She never did. Just nodded and folded her hands in her lap. And I wondered, not for the first time, what it cost my daughter to be so understanding, so endlessly mature. I set the pancakes in front of them, watching as Joseph immediately dug in, while Beryl cut hers into precise, even pieces. They were good kids. The best kids. And they deserved a father who saw that. But he didn't. I didn't mean to think about Willis that morning. I'd gotten good at keeping him locked away in the part of my mind reserved for mistakes and regrets, but something about December always brought him back. Maybe it was the cold. Or maybe it was the way Joseph tilted his head when he was thinking, so much like Willis used to do when we were 22, and the world felt possible. I was washing dishes when the memory surfaced, uninvited and sharp. Willis, sitting across from me in that cramped campus coffee shop, his laptop open but forgotten, his hand reaching across the table to take mine. "You know what I love about you, Monica?" he'd said, grinning like he'd just discovered something secret. "You don't need me to be anything but this." I'd laughed. "What's this?" "Messy. Ambitious. Still figuring it out." "I like messy," I'd whispered. He'd kissed my knuckles. "Good, because I'm a disaster. My favorite disaster." I gripped the edge of the sink, my hands still wet, my throat tight. That version of Willis, the one who stayed up late sketching out ideas on napkins, who kissed me in the rain, who promised we'd build something beautiful together, that version felt like fiction now. Because 6 months after that conversation, I told him I was pregnant, and 36 hours later, he was gone. Not physically, not at first, but emotionally, he'd already left. His eyes went somewhere else when I said the word baby. His hand pulled away when I reached for him. His voice turned flat when he said, "I need time to think." Time to think became time to plan. And time to plan became a one-way ticket to San Francisco, and a tech startup that turned him into everything I once said I didn't need. Powerful, distant, untouchable. Willis Noble became a billionaire. I became a ghost. And what neither of us knew was that someone had lied. Someone had kept us apart. Someone whose betrayal would eventually surface and change everything. Joseph and Beryl believed their father didn't know they existed. I let them believe it. It was easier than the truth. That Willis knew, chose ambition anyway, and never looked back. Cynthia, the school counselor and one of the few people I trusted, had asked me once why I protected him. "You don't owe him a gentle narrative, Monica." I'd stared at her, exhausted. "I'm not protecting him. I'm protecting them." "What do I say?" "Cynthia? That their father knew and didn't care? That they weren't enough to make him stay?" She'd gone quiet. Because she knew I was right. So I built a different story. A kinder one. I told Joseph and Beryl that Willis and I lost touch before I could tell him about the pregnancy. That I tried to find him but couldn't. That by the time I saw his name in the news, years had passed, and I didn't want to disrupt his life. It wasn't a lie, exactly. Just an edited version of devastation. They accepted it. Joseph, with quiet resignation. Beryl, with that careful understanding that made her seem older than she was. And life continued. Until the morning, everything unraveled. Christine knocked just after 8, holding a covered dish and wearing the same concerned expression she'd worn for 3 years. "Brought you some casserole," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Don't argue. I made too much." "Chris?" "Monica Bowen, if you say you didn't have to, I'm taking it back." I smiled despite myself. "Thank you." She set the dish on the counter and studied me the way only a neighbor-turned-sister could. "You okay?" "I'm fine." "You look tired." "I'm always tired." "Fair." Joseph appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Morning, Miss Christine." "Morning, Joseph. You keeping your mom out of trouble?" "Trying." Christine grinned, then turned back to me. "You working the church charity event next week?" I nodded. After she left, I stood in the kitchen, staring at nothing in particular, feeling the weight of the day pressing in. Something felt different. I couldn't name it, couldn't even explain it if someone asked, but the air felt heavier, like the moment before lightning splits the sky. I shook it off, grabbed my coat, told the twins to bundle up, and we walked out into the cold December morning, unaware that 7 words spoken by a man 3 states away were already hurtling toward us. 7 words that would shatter everything and rebuild it. The church charity event wasn't until next week, but the gingerbread house tradition was tonight. It started 4 years ago when I couldn't afford store-bought decorations and needed something, anything, to make December feel less like survival and more like celebration. So I'd bought a discount gingerbread kit from the clearance shelf, and we'd spent 2 hours laughing at our lopsided creation. It became sacred after that. Every December, no matter how tight money was, we built our gingerbread house. This year's kit cost $6.47, and I'd hidden it in the back of the pantry like a Christmas secret. "Mom, the walls keep falling," Joseph said, holding 2 graham cracker pieces that refused to stick together. "Use more icing." I used all the icing. Beryl leaned over, her tongue poking out in concentration as she piped a wobbly line of white frosting along the edge. "Try holding it for 30 seconds. It'll set." Joseph did as she suggested, and I watched my children, these 2 beautiful, patient souls, work together to build something fragile and sweet out of almost nothing. That's what we'd always done. Built warmth from scarcity. But scarcity was about to end in the most unexpected way. I was spreading icing along the roofline when Beryl looked up at me, flour dusted across her cheek. "Mom, do you think we'll ever do Christmas differently?" My hands stilled. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. Just different. Bigger, maybe." Joseph shot her a look. "We're fine, Beryl." "I know we're fine. She stopped herself, eyes dropping back to the gingerbread. "Never mind." But I knew what she meant. She wanted what other kids had. Not the expensive gifts or the flashy displays, just the feeling that someone else was carrying part of the weight. That Christmas didn't rest entirely on my tired shoulders. She wanted a father. She just didn't say it out loud. And in less than 3 minutes, she was about to get her wish in the most devastating, beautiful way possible. I was about to respond when the knock came. 3 sharp raps against the front door. Confident, deliberate. Not the casual tap of Christine or the hesitant knock of a delivery driver. "I'll get it," Joseph said, already moving toward the hallway. "Wait." I wiped my hands on a towel and followed him, something tightening in my chest. That shift I'd felt this morning, it was back, stronger now. Like the air itself was holding its breath. Joseph opened the door, and cold wind rushed in, carrying snowflakes that had just started to fall. Standing on my doorstep was a man I hadn't seen in 14 years, but I would have recognized him anywhere. He looked older, sharper, the kind of polished that came from tailored suits and first-class flights and assistants who made sure every detail of his life was controlled. His charcoal coat was expensive, the kind that didn't wrinkle, that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. Snow was melting on his shoulders, tiny droplets sliding down the wool. His dark hair was damp, pushed back from his face, and those steel blue eyes, the same ones Joseph inherited, the same ones that used to look at me like I was the only thing that mattered, were red-rimmed. Like he'd been crying. Or hadn't slept. Or both. He stared at Joseph first, and something cracked in his expression. Pain, maybe. Recognition, definitely. Then his gaze shifted to me. And the world stopped. Monica. One word. My name. Spoken like a prayer, and an apology, and a plea, all at once. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. Joseph looked between us, confusion settling over his features. "Mom?" Beryl appeared behind me, her small hand gripping my arm. "Who is that?" Willis's eyes moved to her, and I watched him take her in the dark curls, the sharp intelligence in her gaze, the way she stood slightly behind me, like she was already prepared to protect me if needed. His lips parted. He looked gutted. "Monica," he said again, voice rough. "I need to see our children." 7 words. The same 7 words that had been replaying in my mind since this morning, though I didn't know why. I hadn't heard them yet. But somehow, I'd been expecting them. Beryl's grip on my arm tightened. "Mom?" Joseph stepped back, positioning himself slightly in front of his sister, his 14-year-old frame trying to look bigger, more protective. I couldn't find words. My throat had closed. My mind had fractured into 1,000 spinning pieces, each one screaming a different thing. How dare he show up here? How did he find us? What does he want? Why now? Why now? Willis's gaze swept over Joseph and Beryl again, lingering on details I knew he was cataloging. Joseph's height, Beryl's eyes, the way they both stood like they were ready to defend me. "I know I don't have the right to be here," Willis said quietly. "I know that, but his voice cracked. "Please, just 5 minutes." "No." The word came out sharp, automatic. "Monica, no." I moved in front of the twins, putting myself between them and this man who destroyed me once and somehow thought he could just reappear like 14 years was nothing. But Willis didn't leave. Instead, he looked down at his hands, and that's when I saw them. 2 boxes, wrapped in silver paper with dark blue ribbons, held carefully against his chest like they were fragile, like they mattered. He lifted them slightly, and his voice broke. I brought these for them. For Joseph and Beryl. Beryl inhaled sharply behind me. Joseph went rigid. They'd heard their names from a stranger who somehow knew exactly who they were. How do you, Joseph started, but stopped. Because he was smart, because he'd seen Willis's eyes and recognized his own staring back. Oh my God, Joseph whispered. Beryl's hand fell from my arm, and I watched my children's faces shift as the truth assembled itself in real time. Now, I want you to really hear this moment, because if you've ever had your past show up uninvited, if you've ever stood between your children and someone who could hurt them, you understand what's coursing through my veins right now. Terror, rage, and something I refuse to name. Something that feels dangerously like hope. If this resonates with you, if you know what it's like when the life you've carefully built suddenly feels like it's standing on the edge of a cliff, then you need to stay with me. Because what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about forgiveness, second chances, and whether some betrayals can ever be undone. Hit subscribe now, because this story goes places most people are afraid to go, and I think you need to see where it leads. Willis took one careful step forward, snow crunching under his expensive shoes. I know this is. He stopped, swallowed hard. I don't have words for what this is, but I need you to know that I didn't forget. I didn't. I've been looking for you for years. Liar, I said, and the word tasted like acid. I'm not lying. You knew I was pregnant. You walked away. I was told you didn't want me involved. His eyes pleaded. I was told you handled it privately and wanted nothing to do with me. The world tilted. What? Michael, my assistant back then, he told me, you'd made it clear that you wanted to move on. When I finally tracked him down 3 days ago and confronted him, he admitted he thought a baby would derail my potential. He was fired within the hour. And Willis's hands shook. I believed him. God help me, I believed him. I couldn't process this. Couldn't let it be real. Because, if it was real, then everything I'd believed for 14 years was wrong. And I couldn't survive that rewriting of history. Not right now. Not in front of my children. Willis extended the boxes toward Joseph and Beryl, his movements slow, uncertain. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything. But I wanted to give you these. I should have given you so much more. Joseph looked at me, his expression asking permission. I wanted to say no. Wanted to slam the door and pretend this man was still a ghost. But Beryl stepped forward. My soft-spoken, careful daughter moved past me and stood in front of Willis Noble, the father she'd never met, and looked up at him with an expression I couldn't read. You're him, she said quietly. You're our dad. Willis dropped to his knees. Right there on my doorstep, snow soaking through his expensive pants, this billionaire CEO crumbled. Yes, he whispered. I'm your dad. And I'm so sorry. Beryl took one of the boxes from his hands. Joseph, after a long, frozen moment, took the other. And I stood there, rage and confusion and something dangerously close to hope warring inside my chest, watching the man who ruined me 14 years ago look at our children like they were oxygen, like he'd been suffocating without them. How dare he? How dare he show up now, after all this time, after all the nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I'd made the wrong choice keeping them, after every birthday they spent without him, after every school event where other kids had 2 parents and mine only had me. How dare he look at them as though he had earned the right? I didn't invite him inside, but I didn't stop Joseph when he stepped back and created just enough space for Willis to enter. The door closed behind him, sealing us all in the tiny entryway, and suddenly, the house felt impossibly small. Willis Noble, with his expensive coat and his regret-soaked eyes, didn't belong in a space this humble. But here he was anyway. Beryl clutched her wrapped box against her chest, staring at Willis like he might vanish if she blinked. Joseph held his more carefully. At a distance, his jaw tight. Living room, I said, my voice flat. Now. The twins moved first, and Willis followed. his movements cautious, like he was walking through a room full of things he could break. He wasn't wrong. I didn't sit. Neither did Willis. The twins settled on the couch, boxes still unopened in their laps, their eyes moving between us like they were watching something fragile teeter on the edge of collapse. "You have 5 minutes," I said, "then you leave." Willis nodded. "Okay. And you don't get to act like you're the victim here." My hands were shaking, so I crossed my arms to hide it. "You knew I was pregnant." "Willis, you knew, and you left anyway." I thought. "I don't care what you thought." The words came out hard, sharp. 14 years of buried rage rising to the surface. You got on a plane to San Francisco and built your empire and never looked back. You made a choice. "You're right," his voice cracked. "I did make a choice, but it wasn't the one you think." "Then what was it?" I demanded. "Because from where I'm standing, you chose success over your own children." Willis flinched like I'd struck him. "Good. Let him feel it." Joseph shifted on the couch, and I saw the way his hands gripped the edge of the box. Beryl had gone completely still, her eyes wide. I should have sent them upstairs. But part of me needed them to hear this. Needed them to understand that I had protected them from a truth far uglier than the story I'd told. "I was 23, Willis began, his voice low. "Terrified. Ambitious, in the worst way. When you told me you were pregnant, I panicked. I don't have an excuse for that. But I didn't leave that night, Monica. I went back to my apartment and called Michael. Your assistant." "Yes." Willis ran a hand through his damp hair. "I told him I needed advice. That I didn't know what to do. And his jaw worked. He told me he'd talk to you, figure out what you wanted, make sure you were okay." I remembered Michael. Slick, polished, the kind of person who made ambition look like virtue. I'd hated him on sight. "He never talked to me," I said coldly. "I know that now." Willis's eyes were glassy. "But back then, he came back and told me you'd handled it privately. That you didn't want me involved. That you'd made it very clear you were moving on and didn't want contact." The air left my lungs. "What?" "He said you were angry I hadn't responded the way you wanted. That you told him to tell me to stay away." Willis's voice broke. "So I did. I thought I was respecting your choice." I couldn't speak. Couldn't process what he was saying. Because if this was true, if Michael had lied— "You believed him?" I finally whispered. "You didn't even ask me yourself?" I was a coward. Willis's hands clenched at his sides. "I wanted to believe it was easier this way. That you'd be better off. That I could chase my dreams without the guilt." He looked at me, and the devastation in his face was almost unbearable. I was wrong. God, Monica, I was so wrong. But here's where it gets important. Pay attention to this next part, because this is the moment where betrayal stops being about one person and becomes about the system designed to keep people apart. About the lies we believe because believing them is easier than fighting. And if you've ever been manipulated, if you've ever had someone rewrite your story to suit their agenda, you'll understand why what comes next matters so deeply. Beryl's small voice cut through the tension. "But why didn't you come back? Later, I mean, when you realized." Willis turned to her, and something in him softened. "I tried. When I was 26, I started searching. I wanted to find your mom, apologize, see if—" He stopped. "See if there was anything I could do. And—" Joseph's voice was harder than his sister's. "I couldn't find her." Willis looked at me. "I searched for Monica Noble. For years. I hired investigators. I checked every database I could access." My stomach dropped. "I changed my name back," I said quietly. "After you left. I went back to Bowen. We'd only been using Noble for 6 months since we got engaged. I changed back the week you left." Willis closed his eyes. "I know. I didn't realize until 3 days ago." 3 days. He'd known where we were for 3 days, and only showed up now. "How did you find us?" I asked. Willis pulled his phone from his coat pocket, hands shaking slightly as he opened a saved article and turned the screen toward me. The headline read, "Local students organize Christmas drive for children in need." Below it was a photo. Joseph and Beryl, standing in front of donation boxes at school, smiling. And in the caption, "Twins Joseph and Beryl Bowen, 14, Say they wanted to help kids who have even less than they do. My throat closed. Cynthia wrote that, I whispered. Willis nodded. I saw it in a tech newsletter that features feel-good stories. I almost scrolled past, but then I saw, his voice caught. I saw their faces, and I knew. He looked at Joseph. You have my eyes, my jawline. Then at Beryl. And you have her curls. But He stopped, pressing his palm against his chest. You both have pieces of me. And I've missed 14 years. The weight of those words settled over the room like snow. 14 years. 14 birthdays. 14 first days of school. 14 Christmases. Gone. I sank into the chair behind me, legs suddenly unsteady. Everything I'd believed was unraveling. The narrative I'd built that Willis was selfish, that he'd chosen fame and power over us, that he'd known and simply didn't care was crumbling. And in its place was something worse. A lie told by someone else. A name change that made me invisible. 14 years of misunderstanding. I hate this, I said. And my voice broke. I hate that you get to rewrite history now. That suddenly, you're not the villain. That it was just... I gestured helplessly. A mistake? It wasn't just a mistake. Willis stepped closer, then stopped when I flinched. It was my cowardice, my failure to fight for you, to question what I was told, to be the man you deserved. His voice dropped to something raw and jagged. I don't get to be blameless, Monica. Even if Michael lied, even if your name change hid you, I should have tried harder, fought harder. You should have loved us more than your ambition, I whispered. You're right. We stared at each other across the wreckage of 14 years, and I didn't know what I felt anymore. Anger, yes, but also grief. For the life we could have had, for the family we should have been, for the time we'd never get back. Why didn't you want us? Beryl's voice was so small I almost didn't hear it. But Willis did. He turned to her, and I watched his face shatter. What? Why didn't you want us? Beryl repeated, tears streaming down her cheeks now. Even if Michael lied, even if you couldn't find Mom, you still built a whole life without us. You became famous and rich and successful, and we were. Her voice cracked. We were here, struggling, and you didn't know. You didn't even know we existed until 3 days ago. Joseph put his arm around her, his own eyes red. Willis dropped to his knees in front of the couch. Right there on our worn carpet, this man who'd stood in boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals and given TED Talks to thousands, he fell apart. I wanted you, he choked out. God, I wanted you so much. I just didn't know you were real, I thought. He pressed his hands to his face. I thought your mother had chosen a life without me. I thought there was no baby. That she'd decided differently. And I was too much of a coward to ask. To make sure. To fight. Beryl stared at him, tears falling faster now. Every year on the day Monica told me she was pregnant, I thought about what could have been. Every December, I wondered if somewhere there was a child with my eyes. But I didn't know. And not knowing, his shoulders shook. Not knowing destroyed me. But it's nothing compared to what I did to you, to your mom, to this family. Joseph's voice was thick when he finally spoke. You really didn't know about us? I swear to you, Willis said, looking up at my son. I didn't know, but I should have. And I will spend the rest of my life making up for that. Beryl slid off the couch. She knelt in front of Willis. And then she did something I never expected. She hugged him. My daughter, who'd gone her entire life without a father, wrapped her arms around Willis Noble and held on like she'd been waiting 14 years to do exactly this. Willis sobbed. Actual wrenching sobs that sounded like they were tearing him apart from the inside. And Joseph, my guarded, careful son, moved to join them. I watched my children embrace the father they'd never met, and something inside me cracked wide open. I had seen Willis Noble stand before senators and billionaires without blinking. I'd watched clips of him commanding conference rooms and launching products that changed industries. But nothing prepared me for watching him crumble at my daughter's feet. I don't know how long we stayed frozen in that moment, Willis on his knees, my children wrapped around him like they were trying to fill 14 years of emptiness in a single embrace. But eventually, the sobbing quieted. The room settled into something fragile and uncertain, and I remembered how to breathe again. Okay, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. That's enough. Beryl pulled back first, wiping her face with the sleeve of her sweater. Joseph hesitated, then stood, putting distance between himself and Willis, like he wasn't sure what he'd just done. Willis remained on his knees for another moment, composing himself, before rising slowly. His eyes were red, his face blotchy. He looked nothing like the polished CEO whose photo appeared in business magazines. He looked human. Breakable. "Thank you," he said quietly to the twins. "For letting me," his voice caught. "Thank you." I crossed my arms, rebuilding the walls that had briefly crumbled. "You should go." Willis nodded. "I understand." "Good." But he didn't move toward the door. Instead, he looked at Joseph and Beryl with an expression that made my stomach twist. "Can I ask you something before I leave?" "No," I said. "Mom," Joseph started. "Joseph, no." But Beryl stepped forward, always braver than she appeared. "What do you want to ask?" Willis knelt again, bringing himself to their eye level. "Your names?" "Joseph and Beryl. Did your mom choose them?" Beryl nodded. "Joseph means God will increase. And Beryl is a gemstone. Mom said we were her most precious things." Something flickered across Willis's face. Pride, maybe? Or regret that he hadn't been there when I'd whispered those names to two tiny newborns in a hospital room where I'd labored alone. "They're perfect," he whispered. "You're perfect." "We're not," Joseph said, but his voice lacked its earlier edge. "To me, you are." I should have pushed harder, should have opened the door and watched Willis walk out into the December cold. But then Joseph said something that stopped me cold. "Are you staying in town?" Willis glanced at me, then back at Joseph. "I'm at a hotel downtown. The Riverside." The Riverside. Of course. The nicest hotel within 50 miles. "How long?" Beryl asked. "I don't know," Willis admitted. "I didn't plan beyond finding you, so you could leave again." Joseph's words weren't accusatory, just careful, testing. "I could," Willis said slowly. "But I don't want to." "Not unless your mother tells me I have to." All three of them looked at me. And I felt the weight of a choice I didn't want to make pressing down on my chest like a physical thing. If I said yes, I was betraying 14 years of survival without him. I was telling my children that absence could be forgiven with a few tears and some wrapped boxes. But if I said no, I was taking away something they'd longed for their entire lives, whether they'd admitted it or not. "Mom," Beryl's voice was soft, pleading. "Can he stay for Christmas?" "Beryl, please." She moved closer, taking my hand. "I know you're angry. I know he hurt you. But," her eyes filled with fresh tears, "I just want to know what it feels like, just once." What feels like?" I asked, though I already knew. "Having a dad." The words gutted me, because I'd spent 14 years trying to be enough for both of us, and it turned out I never was. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't fill the space Willis left behind. Joseph cleared his throat. "It's almost Christmas, and he brought gifts." He held up the unopened box like evidence. "Maybe we could just, I don't know, try?" I looked at Willis. He was watching me with an expression I recognized from 14 years ago. The same look he'd had when he told me he loved me for the first time, vulnerable and terrified and hoping I wouldn't break him. "This doesn't mean I forgive you," I said. "I know. And if you hurt them, I won't." His voice turned fierce. "Monica, I swear to you, I won't." I exhaled slowly, then turned to my children. "He can come back Christmas morning, for a few hours. That's it." Beryl's face lit up like I'd given her the world. Joseph nodded, trying to hide a smile, and failing. And Willis looked at me like I'd just handed him salvation. "Thank you," he breathed. I didn't respond. Just pointed to the door. But Willis didn't leave immediately. Instead, he turned back to the twins, hesitant. "Can I ask what you like?" "I want to." He stopped, looking embarrassed. "I don't know anything about you. And I want to." Beryl glanced at me for permission. I gave a slight nod, and she smiled shyly. "I like reading. And science. And I'm learning to play piano on this keyboard app." "Piano," Willis repeated, and something in his expression shifted. "I played piano when I was your age." "Really?" "Not well, but I loved it." He looked at Joseph. "What about you?" Joseph shrugged. "Basketball, video games, normal stuff." "What kind of video games?" And just like that, they were talking. tentatively at first, then with growing ease. Joseph explaining his favorite games, Willis admitting he'd been too busy to play much but used to love them. Beryl asking if Willis still played piano, him confessing he hadn't touched a keyboard in years. I watched from the doorway, arms still crossed, heart still guarded. But I couldn't deny what I was seeing. My children lighting up in a way I'd never quite managed to create on my own. They weren't just talking to a stranger. They were talking to someone whose DNA they shared, whose mannerisms Joseph unconsciously mirrored, whose analytical mind Beryl had inherited. They were talking to their father, and they were hungry for it. "Can we open these now?" Beryl held up her wrapped box. Willis looked at me. "Is that okay?" I wanted to say no, wanted to make him wait, make him earn every moment. But Beryl's hopeful expression broke me. "Go ahead." Joseph and Beryl tore into the wrapping paper with an excitement that reminded me they were still children, despite how grown-up they'd been forced to become. Beryl opened hers first. Inside was a sleek tablet with a note attached. Her hands trembled as she held it. "This is too much." "It's not enough," Willis said quietly. "It'll never be enough." Joseph's box contained a high-end gaming headset and a gift card. His note read, "So you never have to use broken equipment again, Dad." My son stared at the headset, running his fingers over the packaging, and I saw his throat work as he swallowed hard. They both looked at Willis with identical expressions of wonder and disbelief. "Thank you," Beryl whispered. "Yeah," Joseph added. "Thanks." Willis's smile was shaky. "You're welcome, both of you." I cleared my throat. "It's getting late. You should go." This time, Willis moved toward the door. But he paused, looking back. "What time should I come on Christmas?" "9, I said. "And don't be late." "I won't be." He stepped outside into the falling snow, then turned back one more time. "Monica?" "What?" "I know I don't deserve it, but thank you for this chance." I didn't answer. Just closed the door. After Willis left, the house felt different. Charged with something I couldn't name. Joseph and Beryl sat on the couch, their gifts spread around them, talking quietly about what they'd learned about their father in the last hour. I went to the kitchen and gripped the edge of the sink, staring out at the dark backyard where snow was beginning to stick. Christine's casserole sat on the counter, forgotten. The gingerbread house remained half-built on the table, and my carefully constructed world had tilted on its axis. I heard soft footsteps behind me. "Mom?" I turned to find Joseph standing in the doorway, his expression serious. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I don't know." He moved closer. "And God, when did he get so tall?" "I know this is hard for you. It's not about me." "Yes, it is." He leaned against the counter beside me. "You raised us alone. You did everything. And now he shows up and..." Joseph stopped. "I don't want you to think we're replacing you." My eyes burned. "I don't think that. But you're scared." I looked at my son, my brave, perceptive son, who'd grown into someone wiser than his years. "Yeah, I'm terrified." "Of what?" "Of him hurting you. Of him leaving again. Of..." I stopped, unable to voice the deepest fear. That my children would realize what I'd always suspected, that I was never enough on my own. Joseph put his arm around my shoulders. "We love you, Mom. That's not going to change just because we want to know him too." I leaned into my son's embrace and let myself breathe. "When did you get so smart?" I whispered. "I had a good teacher." That night, after the twins had gone to bed clutching their gifts like treasures, I sat alone in the darkened living room. The gingerbread house stared back at me, still lopsided, still incomplete. Like everything else in our lives, I told myself I'd agreed to let Willis return for the twins, because they deserved to know their father, because it was the right thing to do. But as I sat there in the quiet darkness, watching snow fall past the window, I felt something dangerous stirring in my chest. Something that felt like hope. Or maybe just the memory of what hope used to feel like when I was 22 and believed Willis Noble and I could build something beautiful together. I pressed my palm against my chest, trying to still the ache. 14 years. 14 years of believing he'd abandon us. And now the story had changed. Now there were lies and misunderstandings and different names that kept us apart. Now there was a man on his knees begging for forgiveness. Now there were children who desperately wanted their father. And there was me caught between the fury of the past and the terrifying possibility of something different. I told myself I allowed him back for the twins. But part of me wondered if that was the whole truth. Christmas morning arrived wrapped in the kind of silence that only comes with fresh snow. I woke before dawn, old habits refusing to break, and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around me. Today, Willis Noble would walk through my door again. And my children would experience their first Christmas with a father. The thought sent equal parts dread, and something else I refused to name through my chest. I got up, pulled on my robe, and padded to the kitchen to start coffee. The gingerbread house still sat on the table, abandoned mid-construction. I touched one of the crooked walls gently, remembering how we'd been laughing just 2 days ago. Before everything changed. The knock came at 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes early. I opened the door to find Willis standing on my porch holding 3 shopping bags and wearing an expression of pure nervous energy. He dressed down jeans, a dark sweater, a winter coat that looked new but not ostentatious, like he tried to fit into our world instead of expecting us to rise to his. "I know I'm early," he said quickly. "I couldn't sleep. I've been awake since 4. I can wait in my car if you're fine. Come in." He stepped inside, snow dusting his shoulders, and I caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with cold air and something underneath that was achingly familiar. The same soap he'd used 14 years ago. Some things don't change. "The twins aren't up yet," I said, taking one of the bags from his hands. It was heavy. "What did you bring?" "Too much, probably." Willis set the other bags down carefully. I didn't know what was appropriate. I didn't know what they needed, so He stopped, looking embarrassed. "I went overboard. Willis, I know. I'm sorry. I can take some of it back. I just wanted," his voice dropped. "I wanted this to feel special for them." Something in my chest cracked at the vulnerability in his voice. "Coffee?" I offered. "Please." We sat at the small kitchen table, mugs warming our hands, the bags of gifts creating a barrier between us. Willis kept glancing toward the stairs like he was waiting for something miraculous to descend. "They'll be down soon," I said. "Beryl's usually up by now. Do they normally wake up early on Christmas?" The question, so simple, so parental, hit me harder than it should have. "They used to," I said quietly, "when they were little. But the last few years, they've been gentler. I think they know we don't have much, so they don't want to seem too excited." Willis's jaw tightened. "That's going to change." "Don't." I set my mug down harder than intended. "Don't come in here promising things you might not keep." "I'm not going anywhere, Monica. You don't know that." "Yes, I do." He leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. "I've spent 14 years building companies and making deals and chasing success that never filled the hole I didn't even know was there. I'm not walking away from this. From them. He stopped. From what? He held my gaze. From the family I should have had. Before I could respond, I heard movement upstairs. Footsteps. Whispered voices. Then Joseph and Beryl appeared in the doorway, both in pajamas, both looking uncertain and hopeful and heartbreakingly young. Willis stood so quickly, his chair scraped against the floor. "Merry Christmas," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Beryl smiled shyly. "Merry Christmas." Joseph nodded, less guarded than yesterday, but still cautious. "You came." "Of course I came." Willis moved toward them, then stopped, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed. "Can I hug you?" Beryl launched herself at him without hesitation. Joseph followed more slowly, but when Willis's arms wrapped around both of them, my son melted into the embrace like he'd been starving for it his entire life. I turned away, blinking hard. This was what I'd wanted for them. So why did it hurt so much? We moved to the living room, where our small, second-hand tree stood, decorated with homemade ornaments and dollar store lights. Willis didn't comment on its modest appearance, just sat on the floor near the bags he'd brought, looking like he belonged in a Christmas card despite his billion-dollar empire. "Can we open them now?" Beryl asked, eyeing the bags with barely contained excitement. "Actually," Willis said, "I have something else first." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out 2 smaller boxes. "These are the real gifts." Joseph took one carefully. Beryl clutched hers with both hands. "Go ahead," Willis urged. Joseph opened his first. Inside was a watch, not flashy, but clearly expensive. and engraved on the back were words I couldn't see, but that made my son's eyes fill with tears. "What does it say?" Beryl asked. Joseph's voice cracked. "It says, 'To Joseph, time I can't get back, but a future we'll build together. Love, Dad.'" Willis wiped at his own eyes. "I know I missed your first 14 Christmases, your birthdays, everything. But I'm here now, and I'm not missing another moment." Beryl opened hers next. A delicate necklace with a beryl gemstone pendant. "Your namesake," Willis explained. "Your mom told me beryl means precious, and you are. You both are." My daughter threw her arms around Willis's neck and sobbed into his shoulder. "Thank you," she kept saying. "Thank you, thank you." Then came the bags. Art supplies for Beryl, who'd mentioned loving to draw. A real basketball for Joseph, to replace the deflated one in our garage. Books, clothes, things they'd needed but never asked for. And with each gift, I watched my children's faces transform, not just with material joy, but with the realization that someone had listened, had paid attention, had cared enough to choose things specifically for them. After the twins had torn through everything, Willis reached into his coat one more time. "Monica," he said quietly, "I have something for you too." "Willis, I don't want." "Please." He extended a small white box. "Just this." I took it reluctantly, aware of Joseph and Beryl watching with keen interest. Inside wasn't jewelry or money. Just a stack of printed papers, folded and bound with a ribbon. "What is this?" I asked. Willis's voice was barely above a whisper. "Emails I wrote to you over the years. I never had an address to send them to, but I couldn't stop writing them anyway." My hands started shaking. I unfolded the first one, dated 3 years after he'd left. "Monica, I don't know where you are or if you ever think of me, but I think of you constantly. I wonder if you're happy, if you found someone better, if our child exists somewhere with your smile. I hope you're okay. I hope I didn't break you the way I broke myself. W." The second one was from 6 years ago. "Saw a woman at a coffee shop today who laughed like you. Spent 20 minutes trying to work up the courage to approach her before realizing she was a stranger. I'm looking for you in everyone. It's torture. It's deserved. W." Another from 2 years ago. "If I ever find you again, I swear I will not let go this time. I will tell you everything I should have said when I was too scared to stay. That I loved you. That leaving was the worst decision of my life. That not a day has passed where I don't regret it. W." There were dozens of them, spanning 14 years. Each one a window into the loneliness and regret he'd been carrying. I read them with tears streaming down my face, unable to stop, unable to look away from the evidence that I hadn't been alone in my grief. He'd been searching. Maybe not hard enough. Maybe too late. But he'd been searching. And here's what I want you to understand about this moment. This isn't just about Willis and me. This is about every person who's ever wondered if they mattered to someone who left. Every parent who's carried guilt. Every child who's questioned their worth. If you're watching this and you've ever needed proof that you weren't forgotten, that somewhere, someone carried you in their heart, even when they couldn't find you, then this moment is for you too. Leave a comment below and tell me, have you ever discovered you mattered to someone more than you knew? Because I think we all need to hear each other's stories. We need to know we're not alone in this. "Willis," I whispered. "I know it doesn't fix anything," he said, "but I needed you to know. You were never forgotten. Neither was the possibility of you." Beryl moved to sit beside me, reading over my shoulder. Joseph stood behind Willis, one hand on his father's shoulder. We sat like that, a broken family, learning the shape of wholeness surrounded by wrapping paper and open boxes and 14 years of words that should have been spoken. "Why didn't you send them?" I finally asked. "Because I didn't think I deserved an answer." Willis looked at me with devastating honesty. "And I was terrified that if you responded, you'd tell me you'd moved on. That you were happy without me. And I don't think I could have survived that." I folded the emails carefully, holding them against my chest. "I wasn't happy," I admitted. "I was surviving. There's a difference. I know. And these," I gestured to the papers, "these don't erase what happened. I know that too." We stared at each other across the small space between us, and for the first time since he'd shown up on my doorstep, I let myself really look at him. Not as the villain of my story. Not as the man who destroyed my life. but as someone equally wounded by the same tragedy. Someone who'd been lied to, who'd searched in the wrong places, who'd spent 14 years wondering about a family that actually existed. He wasn't blameless. Neither was I. We were just two people who'd loved each other once and lost everything because of cowardice and lies and names that didn't match. And maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back. For the first time in 14 years, I wondered if healing was possible. The rest of Christmas morning passed in a blur of laughter and awkward moments and small miracles. Willis helped Beryl set up her new tablet. Joseph showed him basketball moves in our tiny backyard, both of them slipping on snow and laughing like they'd known each other forever. I made lunch from Christine's casserole and whatever else I could pull together, and for a few hours, we almost looked like a normal family. Almost. But normal families don't carry 14 years of absence between them, like a third presence at the table. Around 2 p.m., Willis's phone buzzed for the 4th time. He glanced at it, frowned, and silenced it without answering. "You can take that," I said, "if you need to." "I don't." He slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Nothing's more important than this." Beryl beamed at him. Joseph watched with that careful, analytical gaze he'd inherited from his father, measuring words against actions, building trust one small moment at a time. It was 3:30 when Joseph asked if Willis wanted to see his room. I started to protest. Our house was small, humble, nothing like what Willis was used to, but Willis was already standing, eager. "I'd love to." They disappeared upstairs, and I heard the low rumble of their voices through the ceiling. Beryl settled on the couch with her new tablet, absorbed in downloading apps, and I stood in the kitchen washing dishes that didn't need washing, just to have something to do with my hands. 10 minutes passed, then 15. I was drying the same plate for the 3rd time when I heard it. A sound that made my blood run cold. Joseph crying. Not the quiet tears he'd shed earlier. This was raw, wrenching sobs that sounded like they were tearing him apart from the inside. I dropped the plate, barely noticing when it clattered into the sink, and ran for the stairs. But I stopped halfway up, because I heard Willis's voice, low and soothing and devastated. I know, I'm so sorry. Everyone else has a dad," Joseph choked out. "Everyone. And I had to pretend it didn't matter, that I was fine, but I wasn't fine. You shouldn't have had to be. All those father-son games at school. All those camping trips. All those times I needed." Joseph's voice cracked completely. "I needed you, and you weren't there." I pressed my hand against my mouth to keep from making a sound. This was my fault. I should have tried harder to find Willis. Should have told the twins the truth sooner. Should have. "Are you staying?" Joseph asked, and the desperation in his voice broke me. "Or is this just for Christmas? Because I can't." He sobbed harder. "I can't do this if you're going to leave again." Silence. Then Willis's voice, fierce and certain. "I'm staying. You promise?" "Joseph, I swear to you on everything I have, I'm not going anywhere. I will be at every game, every birthday, every moment you'll let me be part of. I'm staying. What if you get bored? What if we're not enough? What if you are everything?" Willis's voice broke. "You and Beryl and your mom, you're everything I didn't know I lost. And I will spend the rest of my life proving that to you." More sobbing. Then the sound of fabric rustling as Joseph must have collapsed into Willis's arms. I sat down on the stairs, tears streaming down my own face, and let my son have this moment without my interference. He needed his father, and for once, his father was there. Willis stayed until 6 p.m. He helped make dinner, or tried to, awkwardly admitting he'd lived on takeout for 14 years and had no idea what he was doing. Beryl taught him how to set the table properly. Joseph showed him the basketball watch in action, explaining every feature with barely contained excitement. And I watched this strange new constellation of people learning the shape of each other. When Willis finally stood to leave, both twins hugged him tightly. "Same time tomorrow?" Beryl asked hopefully. Willis looked at me. "Is that okay?" I should have said no. Should have created boundaries. Should have protected myself from the inevitable moment when this all fell apart. But I couldn't look at my children's faces and take this away from them. "Same time," I agreed. After he left, the twins talked non-stop about their father, about what he'd said, what he'd promised, what they'd learned. They were glowing with a happiness I'd never quite been able to create on my own. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like loss. By 9 p.m., both twins were exhausted from emotional overload and went to bed early. I was cleaning up the living room, gathering discarded wrapping paper, when the knock came, soft, hesitant. I opened the door to find Willis standing on my porch again, snow falling gently behind him. "I forgot my phone," he said, but his eyes told me that wasn't why he'd come back. I stepped aside, let him in, closed the door against the cold. We stood in the dimly lit living room, the Christmas tree lights casting soft colors across the walls. Willis found his phone on the side table, but he didn't leave. Just stood there holding it, looking at me like he was trying to solve an impossible equation. "I heard you," I said quietly. "On the stairs. With Joseph." Willis closed his eyes. I meant every word. "I know." He asked me if I was staying. Willis set the phone down again. "And Monica, I need you to understand something." "What?" "I'm not just staying for them." His voice was low, intense. "I'm staying because 14 years ago, I walked away from the best thing that ever happened to me, and I've regretted it every single day since." I wrapped my arms around myself. "Willis, let me say this, please." He took a step closer. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I hurt you in ways I can't fix. But I need you to know that the life I built, all of it, the money, the success, the empire, it was all trying to fill a hole that only you could have filled. Stop. I can't." He moved closer still, and I could see the anguish written across his face. "Because I spent 14 years believing you chose a life without me. And finding out that wasn't true, that we were kept apart by lies and wrong names and my own cowardice, it's killing me, Monica." Tears were streaming down my face now. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to show up after all this time and tell me that I never stopped loving you?" His voice cracked. "Because I didn't. I tried. God knows I tried. But every woman I met, I compared to you. Every success felt empty because you weren't there to share it. Every Christmas I wondered if somewhere you were okay, if you were happy, if you ever thought of me." "Of course I thought of you," I whispered. "I thought of you every time I looked at our children and saw your face staring back at me. Every time Joseph tilted his head the way you used to. Every time Beryl analyzed something with that brilliant mind she got from you. You were everywhere, Monica. And I hated you for it." The words came out harsh, raw. "I hated that you got to build a perfect life while I struggled to keep the lights on. I hated that you became famous while I became invisible. I hated that our children grew up without you while the whole world celebrated you as a genius." Willis flinched, like I'd struck him. "Good. Let him feel it. But the worst part," I continued, my voice breaking, "was that I never stopped loving you either. And I hated myself for that most of all." The silence that followed was deafening. We stood 3 feet apart in the dim light of a secondhand Christmas tree, and everything I'd buried for 14 years hung between us like shattered glass. Willis's voice was barely audible. "Monica, I never stopped loving you. I know. I want." He stopped, struggling. "I want to be part of this family. Not just as their father, but as—" "Don't." I held up a hand. "Don't ask me for that. Not yet. Maybe not ever." "Why?" "Because you broke me, Willis." The confession tore itself from my chest. "When you left, I shattered into so many pieces, I'm still not sure I found them all. And I rebuilt myself into someone harder. Someone who could survive alone. Someone who didn't need you. But I'm not done." I stepped closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in his blue eyes. "And then you show up with your explanations and your emails and your promises, and suddenly all those pieces I carefully put back together start coming loose again. You're asking me to be vulnerable, to trust you, to risk everything a second time. I won't hurt you again. You can't promise that." "Yes, I can." Willis closed the remaining distance between us, and I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I spent 14 years learning what matters, and it's not success, or money, or empire. It's this. You, them, family." We were inches apart now. I could count his eyelashes, could see the gray starting to thread through his dark hair, could remember exactly what it felt like to be held by him when we were young and stupid, and believed love conquered everything. "I don't know if I can do this," I whispered. "Then don't." His hand lifted, hovering near my face, but not quite touching. "Don't decide anything tonight. Just, don't close the door completely, please. I looked up at him, this man who destroyed me, and who was now offering something that looked dangerously like redemption, and felt 14 years of walls trying desperately to hold. But walls built from pain are already cracked. And his proximity, his sincerity, his broken open honesty was seeping through every fissure. I can't promise you anything, I said. I'm not asking for promises. Just possibility. And if the possibility leads to more pain, then we'll face it together this time. His thumb brushed my cheek, catching a tear I didn't know had fallen. No more running, no more lies, just truth, however ugly. I closed my eyes, leaning into his touch for just a moment, before stepping back. Creating distance. Creating safety. You should go, I said. Willis nodded slowly. Okay. He moved toward the door, and I thought that was it. But he paused, hand on the doorknob, and looked back at me one more time. Monica? Yeah? Thank you. For today. For letting me into their lives, into yours, even a little bit. His smile was sad, and hopeful, and heartbreaking. It's more than I deserve. I didn't respond, just watched him walk out into the December cold. And when I closed the door behind him, I stood there with my forehead pressed against the wood, feeling the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on my chest. I didn't forgive him. But I didn't close the door either. Willis came back the day after Christmas. And the day after that. And every day through New Year's Eve. He showed up at 9 a.m. like clockwork, bearing coffee and pastries from the bakery downtown, and stayed until the twins reluctantly went to bed. He helped Joseph with homework. He listened to Beryl practice piano on her tablet. He fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom I'd been ignoring for 6 months. He didn't push me for more than I could give. Just existed in our space, learning the rhythm of our lives, becoming part of the soundtrack. On New Year's Day, he arrived at 8 a.m. instead of 9. And he was carrying a leather folder instead of breakfast. We need to talk, Willis said. Standing in my doorway with snow dusting his coat. My stomach dropped. About what? Legal things. Can I come in? The twins were still asleep, the house quiet except for the hum of the heater, struggling against the January cold. I let him inside, my mind already racing through worst-case scenarios. He was going to try to take them. He was going to fight for full custody. He was going to use his money and power to prove I was unfit. We sat at the kitchen table, and Willis opened the folder with hands that trembled slightly. I had my lawyers draw these up, he said. Sliding papers across to me. I need you to read them. I picked up the first document, my eyes scanning legal language that made my head spin. But certain phrases jumped out. Joint legal custody. Shared physical custody. No contest. Retroactive child support dating back 14 years. The exact span of their lives. Not 15, because he's not paying for the time before they were born. Just the time they existed without him. I looked up at him, confused. What is this? What it should have been from the beginning. Willis's voice was steady, but his eyes held something raw. I'm not fighting you for them, Monica. I'm asking to be legally recognized as their father. To share responsibility. To pay for what I should have been paying all along. Retroactive support? I flipped through the pages, seeing numbers that made my vision blur. Willis, this is number. 14 years of child support, calculated at what the court would have mandated if we'd gone through proper channels. He leaned forward. It's not enough. It'll never be enough. But it's what I owe. I set the papers down with shaking hands. You're just giving this to me? It's not giving. It's correcting. His jaw tightened. You've carried everything alone for 14 years. The financial burden. The emotional weight. The endless nights. And impossible choices. I can't give back time, but I can make sure you never struggle like that again. I couldn't speak. Couldn't process what I was reading. This wasn't a custody battle. It was surrender. Not of the twins, but of the right to claim innocence. To negotiate. To protect himself legally. There's no trap here? I finally asked. No clause that gives you more power? Read every word if you want. Have your own lawyer look at it. Willis pushed another paper forward. This one establishes a trust fund for Joseph and Beryl's education. College. Graduate school. Whatever they want. It's protected, in their names only. Willis. And this one, he slid over a third document. This gives you full medical decision-making power unless you choose to share it. I'm not trying to take control, Monica. I'm trying to be a partner in this, if you'll let me. I stared at the papers spread across my second-hand table, my coffee going cold, my world tilting on its axis again. This man, who could have used his wealth and influence to destroy me in court, who could have hired a team of lawyers to prove I'd kept his children from him, was instead handing me power on a silver platter. No manipulation, no bitterness, just correction. Why? I whispered. Because it's right. He met my eyes. And because I'm done running from responsibility. I want to be their father legally, officially, permanently. But I won't do it by hurting you. You're their mother. You're the one who kept them alive and healthy and whole. I'm not replacing you. I'm joining you. A sob caught in my throat. 14 years of doing everything alone, and suddenly, someone was offering to carry half the weight. I need time to read these, I managed. Take all the time you need. Willis stood, preparing to leave. There's no pressure. No deadline. Just when you're ready. But I wasn't ready for him to go yet. Willis? He turned back. Yeah? Thank you. The smile he gave me was soft and sad and hopeful all at once. Don't thank me for doing what I should have done from the beginning. 3 days later, after I'd had a lawyer, Christine recommended review every word. I signed the papers. Willis had been honest. There were no traps, no hidden agendas. Just a father taking responsibility. The twins were ecstatic when I told them, not about the legal jargon or the money, I kept those details vague, but about what it meant. So he's officially our dad now? Beryl asked, her eyes shining. He always was, I said gently. But yes, officially. Joseph was quieter, but I saw the relief on his face. The way his shoulders relaxed like he'd been bracing for disappointment and finally felt safe to hope. 2 weeks later, Willis asked if the twins could spend a weekend with him. I found a house, he explained. Not a penthouse or a mansion, just a house. 3 streets away from here. I want them to see it, to have their own rooms there. My first instinct was to say no, to keep them close, where I could protect them. But Joseph and Beryl were staring at me with identical expressions of pleading hope. And I remembered what Willis had said. I'm not replacing you. I'm joining you. Okay, I agreed. But you call me, if anything. We'll call every night, Willis promised. And they can come home anytime they want. Friday evening arrived too quickly. Willis picked up the twins with their overnight bags, and I stood on the porch watching my children climb into his car, a modest SUV he'd bought specifically for them, not the sports car I'd seen in magazine photos. We'll be fine, Mom, Joseph called out the window. I know. But as they drove away, taillights disappearing into the January dusk, the house became unbearably quiet. I walked through rooms that suddenly felt too big and too small at the same time. Their bedroom doors stood open. Joseph's basketball sat abandoned in the corner. Beryl's tablet was charging on the kitchen counter, forgotten in her excitement. I made dinner for one and couldn't eat it. Tried to watch TV and couldn't focus. Finally gave up and sat on the couch in the dim living room. The Christmas tree still up, though we should have taken it down weeks ago, and let the silence press down on me. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? For my children to have a father, for someone else to share the burden. So why did it feel like I was losing them? My phone rang at 8 p.m. Mom! Beryl's voice was breathless with excitement. You should see my room. Dad, let me pick the paint color and everything. That's wonderful, baby. And there's a basketball hoop in the backyard, Joseph yelled in the background. I talked to them for 20 minutes, listening to their joy, their laughter, their descriptions of a life I hadn't provided. And when Willis got on the phone at the end, his voice was gentle. They miss you, he said. They've asked about you 6 times already. I'm fine. Monica. I am. Really. I wasn't. I'm happy they're happy. This doesn't change anything between you and them. You know that, right? I know. But I didn't. Not really. Because everything was changing, and I was terrified of what that meant. I didn't sleep that night. Just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around me, feeling the weight of 14 years pressing down on my chest. I'd done this alone for so long that I didn't know how to share it. Didn't know how to let go without feeling like I was disappearing. Because if I wasn't the only parent, the one they needed, the one they depended on, then who was I? The thought terrified me more than anything Willis had done or could do. Around 3 a.m., I got up and went to their rooms. Stood in Joseph's doorway, looking at his unmade bed, his posters on the wall, his shoes scattered on the floor. Then crossed to Beryl's room, where stuffed animals lined the shelves and drawings covered the desk. Evidence of the children I'd raised alone. Proof that I'd been enough, even when it felt like I wasn't. My phone buzzed with a text from Willis. "They're both asleep. Wanted you to know they're safe." Below it was a photo. Joseph and Beryl, curled up in sleeping bags on the floor of an empty bedroom, having apparently chosen to sleep together their first night in the new house rather than in separate rooms. Looking at each other for comfort the way they always had when the world felt too big. I sent back, "Thank you." His response came immediately. "You did this. You made them into these amazing humans. I'm just catching up." I stared at those words until they blurred through my tears. When Willis brought them home Sunday evening, both twins talked non-stop about the weekend. But within an hour, they'd settled back into our small house like they'd never left. Joseph sprawled on the couch with his phone, Beryl curled up with a book. And they both gravitated toward me without even realizing it. Joseph asking what was for dinner, Beryl showing me a drawing she'd made. Needing me the way they always had. After they went to bed, Willis lingered at the door. They were homesick, he admitted. Last night around midnight, Beryl came to my room crying. She wouldn't tell me why, but I think it was just everything feeling different. Did she call me? She wanted to. But I didn't want to worry you. He shifted uncomfortably. I probably should have let her. Next time, let her. My voice was firm. I don't care what time it is. If they need me, they call. Okay, Willis studied my face. Are you okay? I don't know. The honesty surprised me. This is what I wanted for them. But it's harder than I thought it would be. Healing usually is. I looked at him, this man who'd walked back into our lives and turned everything upside down in the best and worst ways, and felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness, exactly. But understanding, maybe. That we were both navigating uncharted territory. Both learning how to be what our children needed, while carrying the weight of what we'd lost. "Same time next weekend?" he asked. I nodded. Same time. After he left, I stood in the quiet house and let the truth settle over me like snow. Healing, it turned out, was not soft. It was sharp, terrifying, and necessary. January melted into February, and Willis Noble became part of the fabric of our lives in ways I never expected. The house he bought was modest, by Billionaire standards, a 3-bedroom colonial with blue shutters 3 streets away from ours, close enough for the twins to walk if they wanted, far enough that I could breathe. He'd asked Beryl and Joseph to help him furnish it, and I'd watched through photos they eagerly showed me, as empty rooms transformed into a real home. Not a showpiece, not a museum of wealth, just a place where children could track mud on the floors and leave dishes in the sink and feel safe. The twins spent every other weekend there, and midweek dinners became routine. And slowly, so slowly, I didn't notice it happening until it had our fractured family began to heal. The first co-parenting meeting happened in a coffee shop downtown. Neutral territory. Public. Safe. Willis brought a notebook and a tablet, looking every bit the CEO preparing for a business negotiation. I brought anxiety and a carefully constructed list of boundaries. "I want to make sure we're aligned on rules," I started. "Bedtime, screen time, homework expectations." "Whatever you say goes," Willis interrupted gently. "You've been doing this for 14 years. I'm not here to undermine you." I blinked. "You're not going to argue?" "Monica, I don't know what I'm doing." He set down his pen, vulnerability written across his face. "You do, so teach me, please." That first meeting lasted 3 hours. We covered everything from discipline strategies, to food allergies, to how Joseph needed space when he was upset, and Beryl needed conversation. Willis took notes like his life depended on it, asking questions that proved he was actually listening. "Joseph mentioned he wants to try out for the school basketball team," Willis said. "But he's worried about the cost of the uniform and travel fees." "I'm handling it," I said automatically. "Can I handle it?" Willis. "Not to take over. Not to show you up. Just to help." His eyes were sincere. "Please, let me help." I'd spent so long doing everything alone that accepting help felt like failure. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just partnership. "Okay, I agreed quietly. You can handle basketball fees. The smile he gave me was like sunrise. The media found out in March. Someone recognized Willis picking up the twins from school and posted it online. Within 24 hours, billionaire CEO's secret children was trending, and reporters were calling my phone. I stood in my kitchen staring at my cell as it rang for the 8th time that morning, panic rising in my throat. Make it stop, I whispered to no one. My phone buzzed with a text from Willis. Don't answer any calls, I'm handling it. 2 hours later, he'd released a statement through his company. I recently reconnected with my children and their mother after years apart due to circumstances beyond our control. I'm grateful for this second chance and ask that you respect our privacy as we navigate this as a family. My children are not public figures. Leave them alone. Short, direct, protective. The calls slowed, but the gossip didn't. Christine mentioned she'd heard people talking at church. The school counselor, Cynthia, pulled me aside to ask if we needed support. Even the cashier at the grocery store gave me a knowing look when I bought milk. Everyone's talking about us, I told Willis during our next meeting. Let them talk. His jaw was tight. As long as they leave Joseph and Beryl alone. What if this affects them at school? Then I'll handle it. He leaned forward. Monica, I know my presence in their lives comes with complications, but I promise you, I will protect them from every consequence of my fame that I can. And he did. When a photographer showed up at Joseph's basketball game, Willis had his lawyers send a cease and desist letter within hours. When someone posted photos of Beryl online, he got them removed and the account suspended. He proved, over and over, that he meant what he said. Now I want you to think about something. How many of you have watched someone prove themselves through actions instead of words? How many times have you needed to see consistency before you could believe change was real? That's what these months were about. Not grand gestures, not dramatic declarations, just showing up, day after day after day. If that resonates with you, if you understand what it means to rebuild trust one small moment at a time, then share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about passion, they're about persistence. Our co-parenting meetings began moving from coffee shops to my kitchen, partially because it was more convenient, partially because the twins liked being present for some discussions, but mostly because the distance between Willis and me was slowly, cautiously shrinking. One evening in April, after a meeting about summer plans, Willis helped me wash dishes while the twins did homework at the table. You don't have to do that, I said, watching him scrub a plate with more concentration than necessary. I want to. We worked in companionable silence, and I found myself noticing small things. The way his sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, the gray threading through his hair at the temples, the small scar on his left hand I didn't remember from before. 14 years had changed both of us, made us older, warier, but maybe wiser too. Monica, his voice was quiet. Yeah? Thank you for letting me in. I know it hasn't been easy. I dried a mug slowly, considering my words. You've earned it. Showing up every day, being consistent, putting them first. I met his eyes. That matters more than the apologies. Something shifted in his expression. I'll keep showing up. For as long as you'll let me. I know. And I did know, because Willis had proven it through actions, not promises. In May, Willis had to travel for business. 2 weeks in Asia for meetings that couldn't be rescheduled. He told the twins over dinner at my house, and I watched Joseph's face close off immediately. You're leaving, my son said flatly. For work, but I'll be back. That's what you said before. Joseph pushed back from the table. 14 years ago. Joseph, I started, but he was already gone, his bedroom door slamming shut. Willis looked stricken. I should go talk to him. Give him space, I advised. He's scared. That's all this is. But later that night, after Willis had reluctantly left and Beryl was asleep, I found Joseph crying in his room. He's leaving again, my son sobbed. I knew it was too good to be true. He's coming back, baby. You don't know that. Yes, I do. I held him while he cried. Because he's different now. Because he understands what he lost. Because he loves you. Then why is he going? It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself. The next morning, Willis showed up earlier than usual. I canceled the trip, he announced. I stared at him. What? I sent my CFO instead. I'm not going. He looked past me toward the stairs. Can I talk to Joseph? My son appeared in the doorway, face puffy from crying. Willis knelt in front of him. I'm not going to Asia. I'm staying here. But your meetings can be handled by someone else. You can't be. Willis took Joseph's hands. I understand why you're scared. I've given you every reason not to trust me, but I need you to hear this. I will never choose work over you again. Never. If there's a business trip I absolutely have to take, you and Beryl can come with me. But I'm not disappearing. Not now. Not ever. Joseph collapsed into his father's arms, and I turned away to hide my tears. This man had sacrificed a multi-million-dollar deal for my son's peace of mind. That's when I knew. He'd really changed. Late May brought warm weather and longer days. Willis had started joining us for family dinners several nights a week. And one evening after the twins went to bed, he lingered on the porch with me. Beautiful night, he said, leaning against the railing. It is. We stood in comfortable silence, listening to crickets and distant traffic. Can I ask you something? Willis's voice was careful. Depends what it is. Do you ever think about us? Not as co-parents, as what we were before? My heart stuttered. Willis, I know it's complicated. I know I have no right to even ask. But Monica, he turned to face me fully. These last few months, getting to know you again, watching you with our kids, seeing the incredible woman you became, I can't stop thinking about what we could be, what we were supposed to be. We were kids, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. We were in love. He didn't touch me, but the intensity in his eyes felt like physical contact, and I don't think that ever really went away, not for me. It's been 14 years. I know. But the way my heart speeds up when you laugh, the way I look for excuses to be near you, the way I catch myself watching you when I think you're not looking. His voice dropped. That's not co-parenting, Monica. That's something else entirely. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Because he was right. Somewhere between the legal papers and the shared dinners and the quiet moments washing dishes, something had shifted. The anger had mellowed. The walls had cracked. And underneath 14 years of hurt, the foundation we'd built at 22 was still there. Weathered. Damaged. But not destroyed. I'm scared, I admitted. So am I. What if it doesn't work? What if it does? He stepped closer. Monica, I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that maybe we get a second chance, that maybe we could be a family, a real one. I looked up at him, this man who'd broken me and was now offering to help rebuild us both, and felt something dangerous bloom in my chest. Hope. I need time, I said. Take all the time you need. He smiled softly. I've waited 14 years. I can wait longer. After he left, I sat on the porch in the warm spring darkness and let myself imagine it. Willis and me, together. Not just for the kids, but for us. A family rebuilt from ruins. Maybe love wasn't something that died. Maybe it hibernated, waiting for spring. Summer arrived with the kind of heat that made everything slow down and breathe deeper. 6 months had passed since Willis knocked on my door holding wrapped boxes and 14 years of regret. 6 months of learning how to be a family in fractured pieces that were slowly, carefully fusing back together. Joseph had made the basketball team starting lineup, thanks to Willis attending every practice and learning the game alongside him. Beryl had performed in her first piano recital, playing on a real keyboard Willis had bought, but I'd approved. Their grades were excellent. Their smiles came easier. They were blossoming in ways I'd always hoped for, but couldn't quite create alone. And Willis had proven, day after day, that he meant every promise he'd made. He showed up for parent-teacher conferences and doctor's appointments. He learned to braid Beryl's hair after watching 3 YouTube tutorials. He taught Joseph to change a tire and balance a checkbook. He integrated himself into our lives not as a visitor, but as a permanent fixture. The house 3 streets away became a second home for the twins, complete with inside jokes and family movie nights and a refrigerator covered in their artwork. We'd built something I never thought possible: stability. But there was still one door I hadn't opened. The one that led back to us. It was a humid evening in late June when everything changed. The twins were at a sleepover at Christine's house. Her grandson's birthday party had turned into an overnight event. and both Joseph and Beryl had begged to stay. I'd agreed, secretly relieved to have a night to myself. I was on the porch with a book and iced tea, wearing cut-off shorts and an old t-shirt, my hair pulled into a messy bun, when I heard footsteps on the walkway. Willis. But different. No coffee. No tablet. No agenda written on his face. Just him, in jeans and a plain gray t-shirt, looking nervous in a way I hadn't seen since we were 22, and he'd asked me to be his girlfriend. "Hey," he said, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. "Hey." I set my book down. "The twins aren't here. They're at Christine's." "I know," Joseph texted me. "Oh." He climbed the steps slowly, and I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. "Monica, can I ask you something? You're asking permission to ask permission?" I tried to smile, but my heart was suddenly racing. Willis didn't smile back. Just looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "I've spent 6 months being the father I should have always been," he said quietly. "And every single day, I've watched you. The way you love them. The way you've built this incredible life, from nothing. The way you've let me in, despite every reason not to. Willis, let me finish, please." He took a breath. "I know I've been focused on earning their forgiveness, on proving I could be a good father. But Monica," his voice cracked, "can I earn the right to stay in your life too? Not just as their dad, but as more?" The world seemed to still. 6 months of careful distance. 6 months of co-parenting, and shared dinners, and moments where our hands accidentally touched, and we both pulled away. 6 months of rebuilding trust, while keeping our hearts at arm's length. And now he was asking for the one thing I'd been too terrified to want. And here's what I need you to hear. Right now. This moment, right here. This is what every single one of us is searching for: someone willing to ask the hard question. Someone willing to risk rejection for the possibility of something real. If you've been watching this story and feeling something shift in your own heart, if you've been wondering whether second chances are real or just fairy tales, then I want you to do something for me. Hit that like button if you believe love can be rebuilt. Because we need to know we're not alone in hoping. We need to know that other people believe broken things can become beautiful again. "I don't know if I can do this," I whispered. Willis climbed the last step, closing the distance between us until he was standing right in front of my chair. Close enough to touch. Close enough to hurt me again. "Tell me why," he said gently. "Tell me what you're afraid of." "Everything." The word broke on my lips. "I'm afraid you'll leave again. I'm afraid you'll realize this life isn't enough. I'm afraid I'll let myself love you, and you'll break me worse than before." "What else?" "I'm afraid I'm not enough." The confession tore itself from my chest, that without the struggle and the survival and the endless grinding, I'm just ordinary. And you're Willis Noble. You could have anyone. Someone polished and educated and worthy of your world. "Stop." Willis dropped to his knees in front of my chair, his hands gripping the armrests. "Monica, you are the least ordinary person I've ever met. You raised 2 extraordinary children alone. You built a life from scarcity and made it rich. You survived my abandonment and still found the grace to let me back in." His eyes were glassy. "You're not ordinary. You're miraculous." Tears streamed down my face. "But what if it's not enough? What if 6 months from now? Or a year? Or 5 years? You realize, I won't." His voice was fierce. "I've had 14 years to realize what matters, and it's not success or money or any of the things I chased when I was too stupid to see what I had. It's this: you, them, family. Coming home to people who love you not for what you've built but for who you are. Willis, I love you, Monica." The words hung in the humid summer air between us. I never stopped. "And I will spend the rest of my life proving that you can trust me with your heart again. If you'll let me." I looked down at this man kneeling on my weathered porch, offering me everything, asking for a chance I wasn't sure I could give, and felt 14 years of walls finally completely crumble. "I love you too," I whispered. "I'm just so scared." "Then be scared with me." He reached up, his thumb brushing away my tears. "We'll figure it out together. No more running, no more hiding. Just truth and time and whatever comes. And if it falls apart, Then, at least we tried. At least we gave our kids an example of what it looks like to fight for love instead of running from it. He was right. After everything we'd survived separately, we owed it to ourselves to try together. I stood, and Willis rose with me, our faces inches apart. 14 years of longing and loss, and hope suspended between us. This doesn't mean I forgive everything, I said. I know. And I need you to be patient with me. I will be. And if you hurt them, I won't. His hand cupped my face. Monica, I swear on everything I have. I won't hurt any of you again. I'll spend every day earning this. I searched his eyes for any hint of uncertainty, any shadow of the boy who'd run 14 years ago. But all I saw was a man who'd learned what mattered too late and was desperate not to lose it again. Okay, I breathed. Okay? Okay. I stepped closer. Stay, be part of this, be part of us. Are you sure? Instead of answering, I closed the remaining distance between us and kissed him. It wasn't like the kisses from 14 years ago, urgent and reckless and tasting of youth. This kiss was slower, deeper, weighted with everything we'd lost and everything we were choosing to rebuild. Willis's arms wrapped around me, pulling me close, and I melted into him like coming home after a long, brutal journey. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead against mine. I've missed you, he whispered, every single day. I've missed you too, even when I hated you. He laughed, the sound raw and wet. I deserved the hatred. Maybe, but I'm tired of hating. I pulled back to look at him. I want to try something different. What's that? Love, trust, partnership. I smiled through my tears, all the things we should have had from the beginning. Willis kissed me again, softer this time, reverent, like I was something precious he was afraid to break. And for the first time in 14 years, I felt whole. We sat on the porch swing together, his arm around my shoulders, my head resting against his chest, listening to crickets and distant thunder, and the sound of our own breathing. The twins are going to lose their minds, I said. In a good way? In the best way, I smiled. They've been asking me for months if we were getting back together. Smart kids. They get it from their father. Willis kissed the top of my head. They get it from both of us. Can I tell you something? This moment right here, this is why I share these stories. Because somewhere out there, someone is sitting in their own darkness wondering if healing is possible. Wondering if the person who hurt them could ever change. Wondering if love gets a second chapter. And I need you to know, sometimes it does. Not always. Not easily. But sometimes broken things find their way back to whole. If this story has touched you, if it's made you feel something you thought you'd buried, then leave a comment below. Tell me, do you believe in second chances? Because your story matters. And there are people who need to hear it. We talked until midnight, making plans and setting boundaries, and dreaming about what our rebuilt family could look like. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and honest and whole. When Willis finally stood to leave, I stopped him. Stay, I said. Monica, not like that. I gestured to the house. Stay. I don't want you 3 streets away tonight. I want you here. The smile that spread across his face was like watching the sun rise. Are you sure? I'm sure. We sat up talking until 3 a.m., curled together on the couch like we used to do 14 years ago, sharing dreams and fears and everything we'd carried alone. And when the twins came home the next morning, bursting through the door with stories about the sleepover, they stopped dead at the sight of Willis and me in the kitchen making breakfast together. Is this, Joseph started, eyes wide. Are you? Beryl couldn't finish. Willis looked at me. I nodded. Your mom and I are giving this another chance, Willis said, if that's okay with you. Both twins screamed and launched themselves at us, and we all fell into a laughing, crying heap on the kitchen floor. A family. Broken and rebuilt, and stronger for the fractures. That evening, as sunset painted the sky orange and pink, Willis stood at my door, preparing to head back to his house to grab some things. Thank you, he said softly, for not giving up on us. I stepped forward and kissed him, tasting possibility and promise and second chances. This time, I didn't close the door, I whispered against his lips, and neither did he. You know what the beautiful thing is? This story, Monica and Willis, Joseph and Beryl, it's not just their story. It's a reflection of every family that's ever been broken and dared to believe in repair. Every parent who's carried guilt. every child who's longed for connection, every person who stood at their own door wondering whether to close it or leave it open. If you made it this far, you're part of this community. You understand that healing isn't linear, that forgiveness is complicated, that love sometimes needs a second chance to get it right. So, here's what I want you to do. Subscribe to this channel, because there are more stories like this. Stories of women who refused to stay broken. Stories of families that rebuilt themselves. Stories that might just be the mirror you need. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's standing at their own door right now trying to decide. And comment below with one word that describes how this story made you feel. Just one word. Because I read every single one, and your words remind me why these stories matter. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing that broken doesn't mean beyond repair. Until the next story, take care of your heart,